Okay, I'm going to do a quick video on comparing the DJI FPV drone on the left over here with the goggles to the DJI Mini 2 over here on the right. Also got the Mini 1. I'm not going to be really talking about that much, but I've got about 500 miles on these two drones right here. Been flying them for almost a year now. And I've got about 30 flights on the FPV drone. So we'll be looking at some of the differences, some of the pros, some of the cons. I'll have some comparative videos so you can compare the various footage from the Mini 2 and compare it to the FPV drone. Okay, so the Mini 2 has a lot of things going for it, and I'm just going to go down a list here and kind of explain the things I think are a big plus for this little drone. First of all is the price, $450 to $600 depending on whether you get the combo or not. So that's a pretty big plus. It's about half the price of the DJI FPV drone, which is $12.99, and then if you get the combo pack, that's another $300 on top of that. So you're looking at more than double the price. The little Mini 2 has great portability. It's a small package. It's easy to backpack. It's easy to travel with. That's a huge advantage. Super quiet, great for flying in public areas. No one's going to hear it. If you get near people off to the side, let's say 100 feet, they won't even notice it. Just super easy to fly. Has a great camera equal to the FPV drone, and both film in 4K, so that's a big plus. Another thing to consider with the Mini 2 is durability. I've had a couple of mishaps. All that happened was the arm folded back, and I was going fairly fast, didn't do any other damage to the drone. I did have one situation where I took off and went straight up, hit a branch, and it came crashing down, and it damaged the gimbal for the camera. And I was able to repair that fairly easily. And so that's something to consider with this drone also. Now the Mini 2 can get an honest 20 plus minutes of flight time, and that's very realistic. The DJI FPV drone, you're going to get about half that, more like 8 minutes if you're flying in sport mode at 60 miles an hour, and 10 or 12 minutes if you're flying a mixture of sport mode and N mode. That's still pretty good, and it's an exciting 10 or 12 minutes, that's for sure. Now some of the limitations of the Mini 2 are it'll go pretty fast, 36 miles an hour in sport mode, but you are more limited by winds than the FPV model. So when the wind is up much more than 15 miles an hour, I prefer not to fly. You can fly in those kind of conditions, but especially when you get up higher, you're more likely to hit high winds, and it could be an issue on returning home. Although 36 miles an hour in sport mode is pretty good, it'll get you out of most situations, but something to consider. It's also less stable and less smooth than flying the heavier, faster FPV drone, which just is, to me, seemed rock stable, really, really nice and steady. Some of the advantages of the DJI FPV drone are it's super fun to fly. This thing is just insane. When you get done flying a battery, a lot of times I just want to charge it up again and fly another one. The immersive experience of flying with the goggles is just something else. It's kind of like flying a fighter plane, and there's no risk of personal injury in the event that you do crash. So yeah, you might damage your drone, but you can get down low and fast and crazy and not worry about killing yourself. It's just tremendously exciting to fly low and fast. This drone is more agile and responsive to fly than the Mini 2. Part of that is due to the fact that you have the goggles, but also just the way it handles, it banks and accelerates quicker. Turns quick, responds to the throttle immediately. Top speed in S mode is an honest 62 miles an hour. And that's consistently, and that's fast. You can fly relaxed at high speed if you keep your altitude 100 feet below, above ground level. In sport mode, it's fairly relaxing. But if you get down low to the deck, it can get pretty exciting. The adrenaline's going to kick in. The panic button on this drone will stop the drone immediately. I mean, it's just incredible. It seems like it stops like right in place. It's much faster to stop than the Mini 2. And of course, you have less latency, almost no latency at all on this drone. So the drone is actually where you see it in the goggles. It's not way ahead of what you're actually seeing like it is on the Mini 2. And this thing can handle really high winds. I wouldn't be afraid to fly it in 25 or 30 mile an hour winds. It's not going to be an issue. So that's a great advantage right there. Another factor to consider with the FPV drone is that it's 3 times the weight of the Mini 2 and 2 or 3 times the speed. So it's packing a lot of energy. And that's a real consideration when you're flying around people. You don't want to hit somebody with this thing. You're going to do some real serious injury. Even if you hit a car or something, you're liable to do some serious damage to the car. And that's another factor a person wants to think about. Now, another good feature of the DJI FPV drone is that you have a gimbal that you can raise or lower in flight. You can't do that with ordinary FPV drones. They're fixed. You can change them before you actually fly, raise or lower them, but you can't really do that in flight. So that's a big advantage with this drone. If you're flying up to the top of a mountain or down a canyon, you can adjust the gimbal so that your horizon is right where you want it, so that it's not way up high or way down low. That's a really big advantage. I like that feature. So which drone would I recommend for a beginner? For most pilots, it would be the Mini 2. The reason is a low cost. It's just more relaxed to fly. It's easier to learn on, less likely to be damaged if you crash. It's just a great little drone. Now, you can learn with the DJI FPV, but the chances are you're going to want to experience that faster flight, and there's going to be more risk involved with that. So for those folks that like a more exciting adrenaline-filled rush, then for sure it would be the DJI FPV drone. It's still easy to fly. You have the stability on there, but you have that option of flying, pushing the throttle to stop and just experiencing that rush. You can also use the M mode to fly full aerobatics, but be aware that there's a long learning curve to flying in M mode, and it's likely that crashes are going to occur along the way. So it's not a drone that you want to crash. That said, you can get replacement parts for it, including the camera, arms, and motors. So repairs should be easy if if you're handy. So I have flown the drone a couple of times in M mode, and I practiced on the simulator first. I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. But it's quite different when you're actually flying this drone for real in M mode. The right stick now controls the pitch of the aircraft, and the left stick the throttle. And that's quite different from when it's in S or in N mode. When I was practicing, I noticed my altitude was all over the place. It was sometimes 300 feet up, 300 feet down. And when you're flying high up, you don't have that sense of nearness to the ground where you can judge your altitude. I guess lower down it would be okay, but I feel like I need a little more experience on the simulator before I really get heavily into M mode. It's going to be fun doing loops and rolls, but that's something a person probably wants to wait a little bit on. And so hopefully that'll help anybody who's out there considering buying this drone, especially beginners, people without experience. And with that, I'll go ahead and end it.